What's happening, hockey fans? Welcome to a special crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Senators. Breaking down the big one, Cam Talbot headed to Ottawa in a trade that led to yet another instance where Bill Guerin does not blink when going in a standoff against a player or an agent. Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, joined by Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators. And wow. I mean, you guys goalie-wise have been busy here this offseason, so let's just start there. Just take us through the timeline, Ross. Matt Murray is in Toronto now, and so Senators were looking for a replacement, and here comes Cam Talbot. What do you think?
Seth, I'm so happy we're back, dude. The Kevin Fiala talk went nowhere. Well, to Los Angeles, so nowhere near my neck of the woods, but always great to chat with you. And you always love a one-for-one trade, right? And there's so many layers to this one. We'll get into it. But with Ottawa, of course, it does start with the trade that took 4 days to complete, sending Matt Murray to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they were able to get out of the next 2 years of salary for Matt Murray. Most importantly, people were like, why didn't you just buy him out? They would have had to pay him $10 million because it's a backloaded contract to make it $7 million in salary this year, $8 million next year. Instead, they retained 25%, so they're only on the hook for $3.75. They gave up a third-round pick, a seventh-round pick as a little sweetener there for Toronto to take that contract on. But with that, you're looking at a situation where they were going into next season with Anton Forsberg, who's 29 years old, 30, I think now, who's unproven outside of last year. But, man, he was unbelievable last year. I think he had a couple games against the Wild, at least one where he's standing on his head, looked real good. And he earned a 3-year contract extension. So you love to see that. But at the same time, the Sens are in a spot in the rebuild right now where it's been 6 years without a playoff berth. That's longer than it took them from inauguration in 1992 to get their first playoff appearance. So they needed to do something. They've been aggressive, buying out, moving out money. They go out and get the big fish guy from your division who your fans would know really well in Alex DeBrincat. So you've really kind of made an impact that the rebuild is over. And I know Pierre Dorion got clowned on for saying that last summer, but it really does feel that way. So with Filip Gustavsson, we'll get into his body of work a little bit later, but 24 years old, his first year on a one-way contract. And it's like, can we trust him to be a 1A, 1B type goalie, or is it better that he's like a real backup next year? And with Anton Forsberg, played a career-high 48 games last year. You're expecting him, if it's him and Gustavsson, he's probably going to play 55, 60. So to get Cam Talbot just seems like a perfect kind of 1A, 1B situation. So I think Sens fans are thrilled. The summer of Dorion continues, as Sens fans are pretty quick to give some praise over what he's done the last couple of weeks. What's your initial impression there from a Wild perspective?
Well, I chuckle when I think about all the elements of this trade because we had that just infamous Bill Guerin quote from the draft Friday of, he doesn't have to do anything to cater to whether it was a ploy for a little more money from Cam Talbot's agent, a true trade request. It sounds like the possibility of a trade was discussed but never demanded by Talbot's camp. And so it just became a situation of like, look, if you don't want to be here, you don't want to be in a 50-50 split with Marc-Andre Fleury, let's get something done, get you to a spot where you can be the true like starter. And for a team, as you alluded to, a team that's on the rise. So for the Wild, it made a lot of sense, cleared up some cap room for them to be able to do a couple of things. I know the hot rumor has been Evgeny Malkin coming to potentially to Minnesota if they can try to work some money. I don't know if that's going to happen, but at the end of the day, it's Bill Guerin. Just when you think you've got everything figured out as to like, hey, this is the roster we're going to go into the season with, Bill Guerin says, not so fast. And the thing I like about Gustafsson too is, maybe thrown into the NHL level a little before he was ready. He's going to get the opportunity in Iowa to work with Jesper Wallstedt. Those two will be able to go down there, really get some seasoning, get some experience, because Marc-Andre Fleury is signed for this year and he can come back next year if he wants to as well. It's essentially a 1-year deal plus an option. So they got Fleury for at least this year and maybe next. So there's not a huge amount of pressure for them to be ready right away. So it's a situation where you pick up a young goalie that could end up factoring into the equation after the Wild have come out of the worst of these buyouts. couple of cheap goalies, gives you money to throw around elsewhere. I don't know. I would have liked to have had Cam Talbot going into this season, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't want to be here, you can't have a guy like that in the room, and not to say he would have been a problem, but kudos to Bill Guerin for saying, this is my team. If you don't want to be on it, we'll find somewhere else for you to go.
Yeah, very fair. And because everything I hear about Cam Talbot just seems like consummate professional, like over the years. Sens fans remember back in 2017, Craig Anderson, his wife had just been diagnosed with cancer. He left the team for a little while, came back, and in his first game back, it was a shutout in Edmonton. And he came out for the first star presentation, which away players don't usually do, but being in Canada, there's some Sens fans around the tunnel. He comes out, he's literally got tears in his eyes, and you look down and Cam Talbot's on the other bench giving a round of applause. So just kind of speaks to the character. So I'm surprised, like, what went into the malcontent situation? Was it bringing in Fleury in the first place when he felt it was his team? He was an all-star last year, wasn't he?
Yeah, so I think it stems from, it's one thing to pull in a goalie for like the trade deadline for the stretch run and try to have somebody that can be a starter if you get hurt, or just to make sure that neither goalie gets worn down. But obviously, the way things played out in the playoffs against the Blues was a huge starting point for this whole thing. Talbot's numbers going into the postseason, 13-0-3 in his last 16 starts. He felt he was worthy to be the one that started game one against the Blues. Obviously, it ended up being Fleury, and Fleury started until it was already too late. And the Wild threw Talbot in for the final game of the series, ended up losing, and was not super thrilled about it. So, we as Wild fans and people that cover this team kind of were like, hopefully that gets taken care of and just smoothed out over the offseason. But at the end of the day, there is a tie, obviously, between Marc-Andre Fleury and Bill Guerin from their days in Pittsburgh. And so Guerin wanted Fleury to be here. Fleury wanted to be here. They made the deal. And Talbot just didn't want to be part of a 50-50 split.
Hey, the irony is Filip Gustavsson would have attended a training camp. Maybe? No, I'm wrong. It was that year that he went to Vegas because Filip Gustavsson was drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins. No, it was 2016. That he was 2016. Yeah, it was 2016. So they would have had a training camp together in Pittsburgh. So a little familiarity. We know that hockey circles, there's never too much degree of separation between players, but that's kind of funny, a little rendezvous. And then, hey, maybe you look down the line because he will be an RFA after this contract's up after this season, where you get a little all Swedish duo there with him and Jesper Wallstedt down the road. But I want to ask more about Cam Talbot because, again, he was an all-star. Like, what can Sens fans be expecting from him? The irony is here, like, he's not the one period guy. He's as I said, a 1A, 1B situation. Seems like he's happy. Pierre LeBrun got a quote out of him saying he's coming to a great situation for him. So maybe the change of scenery was enough, and he's closer to home. He's an Ontario guy as well. That could be enough to get him right back where he needs to be. Like, what can Sens fans expect at his body of work as a 35-year-old now?
He is a gamer. I will tell you that for one. The one thing that I've noticed with Talbot over the course of his Wild career is that it seems like if there is a time for opponents to get him, it's early. It seems like it takes him a little while to settle in sometimes.
Gus
but
is the exact same.
when he does, he's rock solid. I mean, he's had some just unbelievable games. He had the game late in the season against the Colorado Avalanche where he absolutely stood on his head, had something like 50 saves, and the Wild won 3-2. So he's a guy that's more than capable. He is a little more net quiet than someone like Marc-Andre Fleury. He's a little more stay close to home. He did have a rough stretch during the season where some of his mechanics, I think, got out of whack a little bit, and little lack of confidence. But those are the kinds of things that can be fixed, and he did fix them. Obviously, 13-0-3 down the stretch. I think he's a really good fit because I think he is a very clear, from my perspective, very clear upgrade over a guy like Matt Murray. And so it makes sense for the Senators to make this move because I think he is a guy that can, I mean, he came in his first season with the Wild and he was fantastic. So he has that in him, and I think it's a really good match. You know, he's not gonna. I wonder what would have happened had he gone to, say, Toronto, and had to go in front of that decor.
Yeah. Well, Ottawa's decor is
Story.
still under construction here too, because they still have, I think, a hole to fill on the right side, but they're working on it here. Still a young decor, but again, he's not going to be thrown into 60, 65 games next year. I think it's going to be something of a 55, 45, maybe Talbot, just with the extra veteran experience and all that. He might get the edge, but again, maybe DJ Smith goes to a guy who he had more comfort with this past season because he was relying on Forsberg about as much as a guy can without, ostracizing the $6.25 million guy who is sent down to the minors at a stint during the year. But no, I love the move from a Senators perspective because what I said there, when it comes to Gustavsson, like where the Sens are at right now, they don't have a Marc-Andre Fleury, right? They don't have a guy who's top 5 in the NHL all time in wins. Now, Anton Forsberg may be top 500 in wins right now in his career, but it certainly just gives them a little reliability. Whereas if you're the Minnesota Wild, and we can get into Filip Gustavsson right now, because maybe for your listeners, like the 2 years that Filip Gustavsson spent in the minors full time, I worked all the home games for Belleville with Pilsy, my co-host with Locked On Senders. We make the drive down from Toronto to Belleville, about a 2.5 hour drive. Get 3 hours of minimum wage, but it certainly added a little credibility to the pod when we were getting started. And we got to see kind of the rebuild begin with the Josh Norrises, the Drake Bathersons down there. But the common denominator was Filip Gustavsson. This guy has played in Belleville every year that the team has existed. 5 seasons in Belleville. Now, he snuck in at the end of the first year after it was a deadline trade. It was Derek Brassard to Pittsburgh in exchange for Filip Gustavsson, a first-round pick, and Ian Cole, who was then flipped for a third. But he comes in at the end of the year, and then he was unreal in the COVID-shortened season in Ottawa. But in Belleville, he always left me wanting more, and it was just what you said about Cam Talbot. There were times at the start of the game where you'd look up at the clock and be 2-0 5 minutes in, and you're like, what the heck? But I mean, Belleville's offense, because you look at the wins and losses, you're like, oh, he's still huge in the win column. Like that team, the COVID year especially, they were first place. They were going to absolutely ride through in the postseason. But when he's on, he's on. And then another interesting thing about him, and this happened his first NHL game, when he gets nervous, his hand falls asleep. Yeah. It was the exact same look that I put on. There's got to be a clip. I'm sure your fans can listen. He just went to the bench, and all of a sudden the trainer's massaging his hand. And everyone's like, what the heck's going on? He's like, yeah, when I get nervous, sometimes my hand falls asleep. But he's been able to make it to the NHL, so I don't think it's a huge issue, but it was certainly an eyebrow raiser when we saw that for the first time.
Yeah, that is, I don't want to say a concern. It's interesting.
Something to keep an eye out, Wild fan. Just if you notice that he's either like going and rubbing his hand or something, just having a nap.
I'm going to it'll just be me anytime there's a video of that, just quote tweeting it in all caps, just saying he's nervous.
Yeah, exactly. But man, when he's on, like his biggest attribute to me is his lateral mobility. The amount of 2-on-1s where the pass goes across and he just, boom, he's right over there is unbelievable. And the way when he goes post to post, his hands are so active. Like you see some goalies, they kind of drop their hands when they go side to side. He is right up there. Fleury's actually elite at this too. Fleury's always in the splits though. I haven't seen Gus go like that. He's just more like quick, boom, boom, great lateral mobility. For him, it's like, if he's good the first 5 minutes, he's probably going to have a great game. So I actually love the swing on upside there. And then when you take into the account the salary implications, where now Minnesota's got a little bit of wiggle room now, I think this is one of those, like, the trade was 1-for-1. Each team gets an upgrade in what they're looking for. Short term for Ottawa. The Sens drafted a 10 in the second round in 2019. Mad Sogar, big 6'8". We call him the Great Dane, friend of the show. And a Danish kid, of course. The nickname has to make a bit more sense. But to me, he's already overtaken as a 21-year-old Gustavsson in like the hierarchy. And that's not to discount Gus. I'd say in Scott Wheeler's goalie rankings last summer, he had Sogard as the 5th best goalie prospect in hockey. So it's not like a discount to Gus, but to me, it's like that's the goalie of the future. Forsberg's 30, Talbot's 35. In realistic terms, he's probably just here for 1 year, but they're not going to need that guy. Whereas you got a guy making $787 on a 1-year deal. I think this is just kind of a win-win, a classic win-win between the Sens and Wild.
Good old-fashioned hockey trade. And
love it, man. In a world where there's so many, even like the Matt Murray trade, there's so many salary dumps. There's so many, like, I'm trading this guy's contract. Like, this is a hockey trade that's going to benefit both teams, and I love it. And there's tons of Sens fans that are going to be cheering for Filip Gustavsson. Now, I need to put this to you right now, because this was, I want to say a 90-10 split, but maybe I'm just pumping my own tires. I'm not telling you which one is which, but there are two nicknames, and there was a portion of the fan base that was really trying to make one work, and I guess we were trying to make the other one work. Which do you prefer for Filip Gustavsson? Gus the Bus or Philly Franchise?
Ooh. Boy, I'm partial to Gus the Bus.
No, okay, get out of here. That's so bad. He's going down to Iowa if you start calling him Gus the Bus. He'll be riding it.
Philly Franchise is real good too, though. I like that.
He hasn't played like a franchise goalie. It sounded so good when he came in. He was so good the first year, but all in all, it's a fresh start for him too, which I'm sure he'll appreciate. This guy won goalie of the tournament at the World Juniors in 2018. So he's got a little bit of a pedigree on him too. So I'm cheering for him, man. I think he's good. He's one of those guys. He's not overly tall, and he's a great quote. You'll like him in the media too. Like, just like, you know, Swedes are like that though. They'll just tell you what's on their mind. No filter on this guy. So he'll fit in well. And they've got a few Swedes already in Minnesota, so they'll take him under his wing a little bit. And then you got, isn't it like the Prince of Norway? Isn't that where Zuccarello's from?
I think so.
I always hear stories when he was in New York. Anyone who was from Norway that would come to New York just expected him to get them tickets.
The Lizard King. We love it.
Stud.
Well, I'll have to try to touch base with him myself while he's down in Iowa, just chilling with Wallstead. Maybe tandem.
Gus the Bus riding the bus down there. No, I would expect, and I don't know if the Wild are done tinkering, but I would expect them to go into next year with a Fleury Gustavsson pair.
I would like that,
because Gus has to clear waivers, so that's that. Yeah, so there's that extra little layer there. This was a 3-year contract that Gus signed, where the first 2 years was a 2-way deal, and now he's getting his NHL money either way, and now he's got to clear waivers. So I think you're looking at a situation where if he has a good training camp, this guy's going to be on the roster. And does he clear waivers if he's not? So that's kind of another thing that you have to look at when it comes to Gus at the end of this year.
There you have it. Potential backup goalie for the Wilds, and best of luck to Cam Talbot in Ottawa. For more on this, for more on free agency, make sure you're staying up to date with Locked On Wild and Locked On Senators wherever you listen to your podcasts.